It started with a smell. Not the kind of smell that comes from garbage left too long or spoiled food in a forgotten fridge. Something sharper, sour, metallic, impossible to ignore. My first thought was instinctive: danger. I had been following the Madeleine McCann case for years, poring over every news report, every leaked file, every interview with detectives and locals. I knew the public story. A 3-year-old girl vanished from a Portuguese apartment while her parents dined nearby. 24 days passed before the world could even begin to grasp the magnitude of what had happened. But nothing I had read prepared me for what came next. The clue appeared in a small, nondescript apartment in Praia de Elas. A neighbor, who asked to remain anonymous, contacted me after noticing something unusual. They had lived across the hall from the McCann's rental for years and remembered odd activity that never made it into the press. "Look," they said, voice trembling, "you don't know what I saw." But it doesn't leave me alone. They told me about a fridge. Not just any fridge. One tucked in a corner of the apartment that seemed ordinary at first glance. Yet during those 24 days, the fridge was opened far too frequently. Not for ice cream, not for leftovers. Always at odd hours, when no one would notice. And the smell, the neighbor swore it was faint then, but unmistakable. Iron, decay, something very human. I went to the scene myself. The apartment was dusty now, abandoned, the walls bearing faint stains from years of neglect. The fridge sat in the corner, white and harmless looking, humming softly as if mocking the horror it had witnessed. I opened it carefully, gloves on. The interior was empty, save for a layer of ice, and a faint metallic residue that smelled of rusted iron and something darker. I snapped a photo. The forensic team I contacted later said it was inconclusive. Too little evidence remained after years. Too much contamination, but my instincts screamed differently. Someone had used that fridge. Someone had kept her there. The next clue came from the logs. Apartment records, rental details, maintenance visits. There were gaps, days unaccounted for, nights when the cleaning crew reported nothing unusual. But a maintenance report from the week after Madeleine's disappearance noted an odor requiring deep sanitation in the apartment's kitchen. The cleaner didn't say much, but the words leapt off the page to me: metallic, rotten. Distinctly human. Then I discovered something even stranger. Photographs taken by tourists from outside the building, published online in forgotten forums, showed lights flickering from the apartment on nights when no one claimed to be inside. Some nights, shadows appeared to move across the curtained windows. Nothing conclusive, of course. But taken together, the fridge, the smell, the shadows, the log entries, they painted a picture more horrific than any press article had did. It was the 24th day that made my blood run cold. A source within the Portuguese police, someone who had quietly watched the investigation for years, contacted me. They whispered that a neighbor had reported an unmarked van outside the apartment complex on the night Madeleine disappeared. The description was chilling. The van had its back doors open for hours. No one saw who came or went, but the timing matched perfectly with the pattern of fridge openings. The implication was unbearable. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was overreaching. A fridge cannot keep a child alive, not for 24 days. No matter how often it was opened, no matter how closely the patterns aligned, it was impossible. And yet, the neighbor's story, corroborated by police whispers, hinted at something worse. That the fridge was not just a receptacle for food. That someone had attempted to hide her there, to preserve her body, or perhaps to conceal the most unthinkable part of the crime. The thought made my hands shake. I closed my eyes and imagined the interior, cold, dark, metallic, and utterly silent. By the time I returned home, I could barely eat. Every noise, doors, creaking floors, the hum of the refrigerator set my nerves on edge. I couldn't shake the image of a child trapped in such a confined and natural space. And the more I researched, the more I realized that evidence had been dismissed, overlooked, or buried. There were gaps in the timeline, shadows in the photographic record, and neighbors who had seen far more than they were ever willing to say aloud, all pointing to the fridge, the final, chilling centerpiece of the vanished girl's last 24 days. The case is unsolved, and I fear it never will be, because the horror of those 24 days lives in the details we dare not fully examine, the smell, the shadows, the unaccounted hours, the metallic trace inside a cold, humming fridge. Some mysteries leave stains that cannot be cleaned, and some horrors never really disappear. After days of sleepless research, I began connecting the dots that authorities had left unresolved. Every detail: the fridge, the metallic smell, the odd shadows, the unmarked van formed a grim pattern that the police reports had failed to emphasize. I decided to go back to the apartment one last time. The building was even emptier now, abandoned and dusty, echoing with the faint hum of its own decay. The kitchen fridge sat in its corner, humming softly, white and innocuous, but I could swear I felt it watching me. I approached carefully, gloves on. My flashlight cut a narrow swath through the darkness, illuminating the ice-crusted interior of the fridge. My stomach turned as I noticed streaks of rust-colored residue like dried blood. Nothing else remained, but the smell hit me again. Metallic, sweet, foul. The evidence of what had occurred here, though degraded, was undeniable. Then I heard a creak behind me. My heart leapt. Footsteps, or the building settling. I spun, beam of the flashlight trembling. The hallway was empty. The air felt heavier, oppressive, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. That's when I noticed the floorboards. One of them was slightly raised, perfectly cut, like a hidden panel. I pried it open. Inside, wrapped in plastic and decades-old tape, were remnants of small items: a toy doll, a tiny shoe, a scrap of fabric. My stomach dropped. I didn't have to see more to know whose they belonged to. This was not just negligence. This was intentional. Someone had hidden pieces of Madeleine here, tokens of horror meant to be discovered, or perhaps never discovered at all. Suddenly, a faint glow came from beneath the refrigerator. I leaned closer. The fridge itself seemed normal, humming gently, but then the light shifted, flickering underneath it. I crouched, feeling for a vent or electrical panel, and found a small, hidden compartment below the base. Inside, nothing. Or at least, nothing tangible. But the metallic tang in the air grew stronger, like the echo of something once alive. I realized, with a cold dread, that the fridge itself was a monument of concealment. The smell, the metallic residue, the unaccounted days, they weren't random. This wasn't just a hiding place. Someone had treated it like a vessel, a way to preserve horror in the small, confined space of domestic normality. Then the phone buzzed. It was an anonymous tip. Texted just now. She's not in the fridge. She's in the system. Watch the logs. Watch the routes. Don't trust anyone. I froze. The tone was urgent, almost panicked. My fingers hovered over my phone, trembling. I pulled up old GPS logs from the neighborhood, the unmarked van sightings. The van had left a trail that circled the town repeatedly. Routes that made no sense. Stops that were brief, almost imperceptible but consistent. The pattern suggested the van was never just parked. It was moving her, or pieces of her, between locations, meticulously hidden from the public eye. My phone buzzed again. Another text: the fridge is a decoy. The body was never there, but she was nearby. Somewhere you won't look. Don't go alone. I felt panic claw at my chest. Who was sending these texts? Friend or cruel trickster? Or someone tied to the horror I was uncovering? And then I understood. The apartment, the fridge, the van, the residue, they weren't just evidence. They were a trail, a calculated breadcrumb path leading to something darker. A person who had orchestrated every step of Madeleine's disappearance, hiding her in plain sight, mocking investigators. With domestic normalcy while exploiting the blind spots of the law. I left the apartment, shaking, haunted by every metallic trace in the air. The streets were quiet. Shadows stretched across the pavement like long, dark fingers. My car pulled up behind me unexpectedly, an unmarked van. The same type described in the witness accounts. My stomach dropped. The driver stepped out. Tall, thin, face hidden in the dark. Looking for her, the voice asked, calm. I couldn't respond. The hairs on my arms stood on end. You'll never find her, he said, and then disappeared into the night. I realized then what the entire case had been about: not just disappearance, not just misdirection, but psychological terror. The fridge, the van, the residue, the logs, the hidden tokens, they were a story of control, of cruelty, and of horror lurking in plain sight. Weeks later, authorities officially closed the investigation, citing lack of evidence, despite the new leads. Madeleine's whereabouts remain unknown. But the metallic scent, the memory of that fridge, the whispered logs, the flickering shadows, they never left me. I still dream of the ice-crusted compartment, of small hands pressed against plastic wrap, of tiny shoes lying abandoned in darkness. The case may be officially cold, but the whole of the human horror was anything but solved. And the fridge, it hums in my memory, a silent witness to the unthinkable, holding a secret no one dares to uncover, because some mysteries are meant to linger. Some horrors are meant to be remembered, and some children are never found.